But I didn't even notice the red flags there, that there was something not right about it. I didn't know that was a darker side that I was unaware of until this murder happened. Because whenever I would ask questions in my marriage, it was a smack in the face or knocked into a window or kicked in the ribs, and it ended up like that. He said, I just want you to know, Judy, he said, you're going to have a hard road ahead of you because there's a lot of female staff that don't like you. For a total of 36 years, I ended up with 28 violations. I'm the oldest of 8 children to a very close-knit family. My background was one of trying to take care of my younger siblings, and we were raised in a somewhat Christian home, and we had a very abusive father. We ended up, I was sexually molested by a minister at the age of 17, and throughout my life, I had other episodes that are mentioned in the book, When the Light Finds Us, from a life sentence to a life transformed. So there's a lot of details in there about my past and about what occurred in my journey and how I got here today. I did marry at the age of 18. I had my first daughter at 19. And then 9 years later, I had a son, Chip. And my daughter was Angel. Her father was very abusive also. So there was that kind of learned behavior, from my mom being abused, that you feel that's the norm. But it took me 12 years before I was able to get up the courage to leave because I was fearful that the violence was escalating and could be turned on the children, especially my daughter.
So when you say abuse, could you just elaborate a little bit more about the abuse you faced at the
Sure.
hands of your father and then later on at the hands of your husband?
Sure. Abuse from my father was also physical, and I never understood it. I would try to step in whenever he was trying to abuse the younger siblings, but he would just fly off the handle over nothing. Stress, he would drink, and he abused my mother continually. She had a miscarriage because of it, so we probably would have had 9 children, but it was something that was just the norm. Even though we had a Christian background, the minister would just tell them, just keep it behind closed doors and God will take care of it. And I remember that so vividly. So it made me believe that this was just the norm. This is just what families did. So whenever I got married, my ex-husband became physically and emotionally abusive. And he would run around with other women and be gone a lot. And he wasn't even there when our daughter was born. I was a middle-class mother that was very devoted to her children. And whenever I felt like the violence could end up turning on her, that's whenever I had the courage to leave after 12 years. And battered women's brains are wired just a little differently than somebody that's raised in a healthy home. We don't notice red signs. We're very passive and we don't ask a lot of questions. So I ended up divorcing him. He still wouldn't leave me alone. I would come home from work and my clothes would be torn to shreds or my shoes cut up. I ended up attempting suicide. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this. So I ended up in a psychiatric ward September through October. I think it was the fall of 80. Whenever my psychiatrist told me that I needed to move out of the area down where my family lived, which was about 350 miles from there, that's what I ended up doing. My mother and stepfather, by then she had divorced my dad and married a very kind, gentle, loving teddy bear. And my mom got divorced. It was like, oh my gosh, Mom, how could you do this? How could you divorce our dad? But that showed me that, well, my mom can do it. I can do it. It's okay to divorce them. You don't have to stay with them. So there it was just another lesson of learned behavior of how to do that. But my dad hit me for the last time when I was 30 years old. And I told him that I was going to divorce my ex-husband. And he just backhanded me and told me that was the stupidest thing I could ever do, that the kids needed him. And we had a son, of course, and he needed him. So that weighed heavy on my heart and in my thoughts that, yeah, a son does need his father. But I was still able to get the courage a few months later and divorce him. Even though I ended up in the psychiatric ward, I did end up moving down with my mom and stepfather. Then in April, I met my co-defendant. And he was a real estate broker, had been in the ministry, just a very suave, debonair. And I thought, oh gosh, this guy's really nice. He doesn't abuse me. He's not jealous.
When you met the co-defendant, I'm guessing you were going off of like looking for someone exactly the opposite of your ex-husband at that point. What were those little behaviors that you were hyper aware of that you were making sure to avoid at all costs?
Okay, controlling. That he wasn't controlling me, telling me I smile too much, because that's what my ex-husband used to do. When guys would talk to me, he would just get crazy, insane. And my co-defendant did not do any of those things. So it was like, wow. And the fact that he had been in the ministry led me to believe that he was very kind, very gentle, and his mannerisms showed that. But we were down 4th of July at my aunt's house, and he was sitting beside the pool, and he was reading a book about manipulation. And I said, well, he's a real estate broker, so I'm assuming, it has something to do with his career. I look back now and I see red flags, yes. In June, I came home from picking my son up at the nursery from my salon, and I walk in the door, but there were suitcases sitting inside my foyer. Sure enough, he had decided to move in. I said, whose suitcases are these? And he said, they're mine.
No discussion.
No discussion, no even a sentence about it. And I hadn't had people or guys live with me since my divorce. That I wasn't comfortable with because of the children. And back then, that's just not what we did. Now it's like, okay, let's do that. But back then it wasn't the norm. And I noticed that he was involved with a bondsman that had a bonding company that got criminals out of jail. But I never was familiar with him, and it wasn't somebody that we socialized with. But I didn't even notice the red flags there, that there was something not right about it. I didn't know that was a darker side that I was unaware of until this murder happened. I look back and I see so many things that I should have paid attention to. Instead, I was paying attention to the other things that I wanted he was doing that I was just blinded to. I mean, you really have to pay attention to the whole picture and not just pick and choose. I hadn't had any counseling. I didn't know anything about the battered women syndrome. I just knew what we was going through was violent. It wasn't healthy when I was married. And now I was out of that and things were nice. And I thought, well, this must be what's normal, but I didn't know to watch for red flags. I didn't realize to do that whenever it wasn't physically showing any signs of it.
What were those behavioral traits that you think you displayed that attracted these kind of men? And this is going to be useful for anyone who keeps finding themselves in that cycle again and again.
Yes. I think it was I didn't ask any questions because I had learned not to ask questions, because whenever I would ask questions in my marriage, it was a smack in the face or knocked into a window or kicked in the ribs, and it ended up like that. So I didn't ask questions. I recommend and advise anybody that gets into a relationship, even men, they need to ask questions. I think you need to not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to pay attention to their behaviors, keeping secrets. I think that's another thing that I never paid attention to. Why would I think he would be keeping secrets? He was with me. We did things together. He wasn't gone for days. He didn't abuse alcohol. All these were the things that I was looking at that was nice. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked more questions. Of course, today, I know what to do. So the murder happened. A hitman was sent to kill us because we knew too much about this.
So what actually conspired sort of that night in that kind of caused this whole situation?
Okay, so I had a girlfriend up in Kansas City that was dating the gentleman, and my co-defendant and I had went up there before we started dating. He had a conference to go to, a real estate conference, and okay, believe it or not, I was going up there to try to make amends with my ex-husband. Now, is that crazy or what? We were just going as friends, my co-defendant and I, and of course, it was a disaster when I tried to do that. And so we were staying at a hotel. He had one room, I had another. It was very respectful. So that was another sign. Oh my gosh, he's not trying to do anything. And I thought, wow, that's really great, because I wasn't ready for any of that, after what I'd been through. But my girlfriend came over to meet with us, and we were having drinks in the lounge. She had mentioned about her boyfriend that lived down in the area where we were at. And I guess whenever she had mentioned that, he perked up and he wanted to hear more. And I didn't pick up on that at all. I thought, okay, well, same area. He's a businessman, so no big deal. And so that's how the victim's name was brought up. And it ended up that he wanted to meet with him. And whenever he did, it turned violent and he killed the victim.
Were you present at the scene when that happened?
I was present at the scene, yes. That's whenever I was shot. The gentleman was killed. So we had to end up going somewhere else. I had to leave my children. I was taken to Alaska because a hitman was sent to kill us because we knew too much. And while I was there, my co-defendant, he took all my IDs. I couldn't call my family, but my family was aware of where we were going because I was able to give that information to my mother. But because I never thought I would be back, so I had accepted the fact that I didn't know when or how, but I wouldn't make it back to Missouri. Then we got up there and my co-defendant became very abusive, and that's when I ended up attempting suicide again. He choked me to the point he had to buy turtleneck sweaters to cover my neck from his fingerprints, and he started dealing in drugs. And so it was a very, very bad situation. So I just had resigned to the fact that I wouldn't make it back to see my children. But God had a different plan. I always tell people I feel like I'm the cat of nine lives because there's so many times I could have died because the hitman, whenever he came to the hotel where we were at to let us know what he was supposed to do, I should have died then, but I didn't. And then we ended up getting arrested, brought back to Missouri, and that's where we had the same attorney representing both of us, which is a serious constitutional conflict of interest. What happened then cannot happen today to any defendant. Yes.
So the attorney,
yes.
in a sense, was representing the both of you in this fight together to kind of help the both of you together, right? So
correct.
How is there a conflict of interest here?
Because you cannot honestly represent one defendant and allow that defendant to take the stand because you can't tell the truth because it's going to affect the other client. So I could either not take the stand in my behalf to prove I did not commit this murder, or I could be silent, which I was, or the attorney told me I could come up with an alibi, which would be a lie. That I would say that I was with my mother shopping, and that's what he suggested. And I wasn't even at the scene. I refused to get my family involved in anything crazy like this. That's just not what we would do.
What about the stance of self-defense?
No, he didn't even bring that up as an option. No, he just said you cannot testify because it would hurt my co-defendant, his other client. So he was getting money from both of us. And so the money played a big factor. But little did I know, my co-defendant was seeing two other criminal attorneys on the side. And whenever I went to trial first, I was convicted. He fired that attorney and hired these other two, and he was acquitted.
And somehow managed to kind of make it look like you were the one that committed the murder, when
exactly
the reality is you just happened to be sort of at the scene with the co-defendant.
Right, correct. Because now I really didn't have a defense. My attorney put on mitigating circumstances and mitigating evidence and character witnesses to what kind of person I was and what, good history I had working as a Christian, and I had a lot of people come up and take the stand on my behalf in that area. But as far as actually having a defense, I did not, because it would hurt my co-defendant.
What was the motivation for your co-defendant, though, to put this or pin this on you? Why not try to fight a case that was him acting on self-defense or someone else at the scene doing this?
He planted everything to where everybody saw my car with personal license plates. He had the whole situation set up to where it looked like that he wasn't even involved. He was at a restaurant bar while myself and the co-defendant were having drinks. And when I went over to talk to him, he pushed me out of the way. He said, don't stop here, don't stop here, keep going. And because I was going to the restroom and I saw him and I thought, what's he doing here? And so he made sure that he set it up so good. I mean, that's how good he was. He was very charismatic, very debonair, very convincing. And so he was not seen. He even paid witnesses to take the stand in his behalf to make him have an alibi witness that he was at a totally different restaurant bar. And the bartender said he was there. Well, actually, he set it up to where 4 offenders, after I went to prison, would go back and testify that I told them I set it up, I shot the victim, and he had nothing to do with it. And these offenders ended up coming back through the prison system, and that's how I found out that this happened. And they gave me signed affidavits that they were this much money was put on their commissary, for them to buy items at the canteen. He knew what to do to make it look like he was not guilty. And then later that year, he was arrested and convicted of selling $250,000 worth of cocaine to an undercover or FBI agent. So his criminal background came to light.
Sketch, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Super sketch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the motive of all of this? Like, why were they having these confrontations?
Like I said, whenever we went up in April, we weren't dating, we were friends. But whenever we came back, he started dating me. So I think in my mind, things were starting to be planned in the very beginning.
Right.
Now that I look hindsight, I think that's when the wheels started turning and things started happening. And I was totally blind to it. I didn't see why I would think anything wrong was going on. But I didn't ask questions. I should have.
When the court case was going on, they were trying to do is find motive for why you would do something like this in order to be able to charge you for murder. What were the conclusions that they had come up with at that point to find your motive for doing something like this?
If they feel they have enough evidence, just circumstantial evidence, that's enough to convict somebody.
Right.
And my co-defendant's ex-girlfriend took the stand and said that I told her that I shot and killed the victim. And yes, and she was one of them. They ended up breaking up, and she started dating the person that lived in Alaska where we went, and they lived together then. So that's how she was affiliated with me and knew me, because that's where we went, was to Alaska, to them. And I didn't even know that was his ex-girlfriend until after we got there and all this was coming out. And I thought, what? I think she got paid for it, for testifying. Right. So he was in the county jail, and the one person that he was talking with in the county jail, he put a contract out on me. And when she came to prison, she befriended me, and I thought she was a friend. Instead, another offender said, Judy, she has a contract on you. Your co-defendant wants you dead.
He was getting a little bit paranoid when he was there in prison.
Yes.
Like, wanted you dead because you might find some evidence to be able to catch him out for this. And keep him
he was fearful that I was going to testify against him now.
Or testify, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what he was afraid of, that I would take the stand, and I was going to. And so whenever the prosecution, they have to let the defense attorneys know what witnesses they're going to call. So he was aware I was going to testify. So he had to counteract that, and the way to do that was to get other offenders to say that I told them. So that would have been 5 people that would have contradicted what I was going to say.
Right.
And they came back to the county jail to testify for him. And the prosecution, later I found out, because I was housed at different locations. And so whenever these 4 offenders came back and was held in the county jail to testify in his behalf, the prosecution said, Judy, I can't put you on the stand. And he didn't even tell me. I didn't even know it till after he was acquitted why they didn't use me. And I thought, what do you mean? What do you mean offenders are coming back to testify? I couldn't understand it. So it was just, I was in shock. I could not believe it. And I didn't know who these offenders were until they made parole and they ended up coming back to prison. They wanted to check in protective custody because they thought I knew who they were. And another officer came and said, Judy, I've got some information for you. And he said, I think we found a way for you to get out of prison. I said, what? He said, we've got somebody that just came back to prison. They were career criminals, so they come in and out, that said that she was afraid to go in population because she was afraid you would have her hurt. I said, for what? And that's when he told me what she had told him. And he told her, he said, we've got a plan. He said, I talked to the caseworker. And if she is willing to sign a notarized affidavit to these facts, that you would sign an enemy waiver and she could get out into population. I said, well, of course I would. You know, this is evidence for me. She said everything that she was told by the attorneys that she was supposed to do and what they offered her, what they gave her, actually. And so we had a notary there and witnesses. And so I got this legal document. And then come to find out there was another one that came back a couple years after that. And she also gave me an affidavit.
I'm curious, did the courts literally only use all of these testimonies from all these people to kind of charge you? Was that evidence enough for them to be able to confirm that you were the one doing this?
Yes, because the one that was involved in this, they ended up giving him immunity. The one that my co-defendant went to after the murder and said, it's done. It's happened, you know, and here's the gun, here's the bullets. And he ended up turning state's evidence against my co-defendant, and they gave him immunity for doing that. But the jury did not believe him in a co-defendant's trial, but they believed him whenever he testified in my behalf, although he actually kind of helped me because he said she had been shot. She didn't know it was going to happen. So he ended up testifying against my co-defendant. My co-defendant's jury did not believe him because Greg had paid so many people to give him an alibi that the jury believed him, and he was allowed to address the jury himself, which was made up of women, 12 women. And I'm telling you, girl, he was so good at talking to women that he convinced these women that he was innocent, that I was this black widow that just coerced him and manipulated him into doing this, and that he didn't do it, that I did it, but I was trying to put it on him. So it was, oh, girl, I was livid. You can't even imagine how angry I was. One, for going to prison. One, for him allowing me to go to prison. And then for putting a hit on me. You know, I thought, oh, no, you just made a King Kong here because now I'm ready to fight. I am going to fight. And so I did.
At this point, because I do know a lot of people that have been sort of like survivors, victims of abuse, they live under a lot of fear. And there's so much coercion and there's so much almost brain fog. And then also having to witness a murder in front of you. It's all this trauma that's sort of coming down on you. And then on top of that, you have your co-defendant that's standing there basically threatening you in the court. The whole court that's not really taking you aside. Was there any point in this, at this point, that you kind of almost started to believe that, like, I don't even know what happened anymore? Like, maybe I did do this, maybe. Or were you very sure that, no, like, I had nothing to do with this? This was not me.
No, I was very sure. Nobody in my family would have ever thought that I would be sitting in a courtroom charged with murder. That just was not me, not my personality. No, he could not convince me. No, all he did was fuel the anger that ended up, because I figured out you could do two things with anger. You can either get bitter or you can get better. And I chose better. And I love my family, my children so deeply that I took that deep love I had for them and the anger that fueled me and combined those together. And I fought tooth and nail for 36 years to come home.
What was the official sentence for you?
I could either have gotten or received life without parole for 50 years or the death penalty. The judge did put in the instructions to the jury that she was a relatively minor participant, to give the jury a little hint as to she did not commit this murder, but they didn't, I guess they evidently didn't get the hint. And, but that's down the road, of course. I did 36 years. The girl that took the contract out on me, that actually helped establish my ground in the prison in general population. Because prison is a very scary, hate-filled, anger-filled dungeon.
I want to
And
know more about your prison time. Like, talk to me about that.
yes, I went there and it was so foreign. I mean, I didn't even know what they meant when they used some of their terminology. Like, if somebody asked you, I want a square, what would that mean to you?
I want a square. A fight?
No.
Look, I want to be even, like fair and square. Let's be even. What is that?
A square is a cigarette.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And if they said goon squad, what does that term mean to you?
Like your crew, your friends?
No, it's the staff that's been trained in to defuse a riot, or they come, the goon squad's coming, so everybody hit the
Right.
deck or
Yeah.
your weapons or whatever. And I thought, what do all these terms mean? I have
Yeah.
no idea. I don't know how to talk their language. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was a middle-class mother, professional business owner. This world was just totally
Different.
foreign.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'd been dropped off in another country where I didn't know anybody, didn't know the language, didn't understand the rules. Because they don't have laws, they have standard operating procedures, which are policies that govern you. You get violations if you go out of bounds and you cross the line and go into another area of the prison you're not supposed to be in. You get a violation if you have a piece of fruit. You get a violation if you have something in your locker that is against the rules, like too many shirts. You're allowed 12 shirts, 6 bottoms. And you could get a violation if you were one item over. Just crazy things that you wouldn't even think would be a rule.
Is it in Missouri or was it in
Missouri?
in Missouri?
No, Missouri.
Okay. Now, would you
Yes.
say that it was sort of like grouped by race as well? Like I've had episodes with male guests who've been in prison before, and they said it really is different groups by race. You know, they don't really mix. Is that also the case in a female prison?
Not so much so. I mean, there were some, but there was not as much as there are in men's prisons, I don't believe. You know, women are more like passive aggressive. You have a lot that will, attack you because Missouri no longer had mental health institutions after a few years, so they would put the mentally ill in prison too. So you didn't know when somebody was just going to click out on you. That's why you have to be vigilant all the time. Always pay attention. Learn to read lips because you don't know what are they planning. So you have to more or less be on high alert 24/7. Even officers, if they don't like you, they have the authority to make your life miserable. And I had a lieutenant call me down to his office at 2:00 in the morning when I was first new in prison. And he said, I just want you to know, Judy, he said, you're going to have a hard road ahead of you because there's a lot of female staff that don't like you. I said, great. You might take my name and you might take my children from me. And you might tell me you're going to break me down and build me back up. But I want you to know I'm already broken. I'm as broken as I'm going to allow anybody to ever make me. And what you're getting ready to tackle is not going to be fun for either one of us. And I had to just pull up my bootstraps and say, okay, Judy, you got to change. You got to get therapy to understand why you were here, what happened, why you didn't see these red flags. And that's when the first time I had ever heard about battered women's syndrome. I went to a workshop and I thought, oh my God, that's me. I started doing every program I could think of that they had because I had to arm myself with weapons. The only weapons that I had to fight with was my brain. And I had to get smarter. I had to learn the statutes, the laws. I became a certified paralegal. Because I had to understand the laws that got me here and all the courts that I went through, my appeals denied. But But there was one federal court that asked, a panel of 3 judges asked the federal prosecuting attorney, do you feel there was some sandbagging going on in her trial? And the prosecuting attorney said, yes, there is. There was. And yet they would not overturn my case because it would affect too many other cases that had the same attorney representing 2 defendants.
Right.
And it would be too expensive for the state. So it was all about the money. It wasn't about the right or the wrong. So I had to end up building my team from the ground up with politicians. I had to learn politics. I had to get senators, state representatives involved. I had to get a support team. I reached out to law schools at different universities. We formed a coalition, myself and another law professor, and for 12 women. I ended up helping pass the battered women syndrome that became a statute and law in the state of Missouri, where women that were abused and killed their abusers had a defense whenever they went to trial.
Right.
So that was very rewarding. I was there to help fight for these women. And
did you find that there were like a lot of the inmates had been abused before and found them were in prison as a result of some kind of abuse with their family or friends or partners?
Yes, that when I finally saw that I was getting healthy and I was getting understanding better, I realized there was a lot of battered women in prison that didn't realize they were battered. So I started Women Against Violence, which is, for battered women, for them to understand the cycle, the honeymoon phase, and here we go again. It was just a vicious cycle, and that's what abuse is. It was such a powerful group that even the governor's office sent a representative to sit in on our sessions, and they went back to the governor's office and they created a domestic violence task force in their state to fight this for women. I didn't stop. I helped a lot of women even become better mothers because a lot of them didn't know even how to be moms and didn't know how to navigate communication with their children, how to understand their children's love languages, how do you mother behind bars. But I did it. I was very successful at it. My daughter and I remained close all through the years. She said, the one reason, Mom, that I didn't know this till just recently, that I always felt so safe talking to you and telling you everything is because I knew you couldn't punish me. I said, oh, thanks a lot, Angel. But there's all sorts of programs that I started for mothers and their children. And we had to start a program that involved the family unit, the relatives, the moms, the aunts, the uncles, the dads, the cousins.
What were some of the other patterns that you found among the women inmates over there?
Okay, so I became a fitness trainer because I noticed that there was women that didn't like themselves. They didn't like their bodies. And I thought, if I can get these women to love who they are and put in the work to transform themselves, that they would end up not wanting to go back to that lifestyle. And so because I always put on makeup, because I also became a hairdresser, and a dog trainer, I was able to put makeup on them, do their hair, let them see, look how beautiful you are. See? And it doesn't take all that to be beautiful, but you need to love who you are, whatever that may take to get you to that point. So that really helped a lot of them. And to this day, they became trainers. So whenever they got out, they had a profession. So we did a lot of work on their inside with being battered women and on the outside to transform them. And it was so rewarding. And one of them that I worked with, when she came in as a baby lifer, she was like 18. And as a lifer, we try to take younger lifers under our wings because they're preyed upon. So I took her under my wing. Now she's an attorney today. She did 18 years. I did 36 years, It was very rewarding, all that I was able to do and get involved with. I love helping people. I still do it to this day. I work with lifers to come home.
Yeah. Did you ever come across women that just came across or seemed evil, like not a result of, abuse or not a result, but they just did it?
It was just innate.
Yeah.
It was just built in them. Yes. And those are the ones that were usually had the mental diseases, that weren't getting either the right medications, the right combination of therapy,
But what I'm
you
hearing
know.
here, Judy, is that you genuinely believe that every single person in there, for some reason, but not all by their own choice, but either it was a
Right.
result of their environment or it's a result of a mental health. Is that something you believe that?
Yeah, it is something I believe. I believe that there's a lot of people that, if given the right help, we wouldn't have to have the population that we have now. Because you can either be a work state where you're using these people as slaves just to do work for $8.50 a month,
Mm.
um, or you can not have as many prisoners and show them, spend more money on their rehabilitation, more money on their counseling, more money on helping them mentally. So, I mean, those are just some of my thoughts. I don't think that everybody that's in there should be there.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, I think.
Hmm.
But more on the fun stuff. Like, talk to me more about like
Okay.
the crazy fun things that you experienced in prison, the skills that you learned that you probably wouldn't have learned on the outside. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, I learned how to bake a cake out of a package of cookies and a soda. So, everybody, get your pen and paper out. I'm going to give you the recipe. So, you take any kind of cookies you want,
Yeah.
crush them up, put them in a bowl, and put about 3/4 of a can of soda. Doesn't matter if it's Sprite, Dr. Pepper, root beer, Coke, it doesn't matter. Put it in there, mix it up like batter, stick it in the microwave, 2 to 4 minutes, stick a little toothpick in it or whatever you have. You have a cake. Then you melt your Hershey candy bars and put M&Ms on the top, and you have icing, and it's pretty.
It's so amazing, the
Yeah.
little creative things. Also, is that
Yeah.
like prison alcohol? Is that a thing?
Oh, hooch. Hooch is definite. It's hooch, yes. And that's why we don't have a lot of fruit in prison. Because, yes, because you can mix that and it can ferment with bread because you have your yeast and you let it sit for days in a bucket. You have to pull the lid up and burp it
Yeah.
because it will explode. Then, of course, the goon squad's coming. You're going to the hole.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And then I also became Secret Santa in prison. Every Christmas, I would pick an offender that, was close to me that I trusted. And I would make these little gift cards and say, $5 for each offender. I mean, they only made $8.50 a month.
Yeah.
So $5 was quite a bit. I would tell them, give me whatever you want for $5 from the canteen. I'd have it worded different and make it look cute. So that was always fun to
That
do
was
every
fun.
year.
Yeah, that sounds.
And then the warden came and asked me one day if I would help them create a honor dorm for lifers. And I said, yeah, of course I will. I said, even though I'm not going to be here, I'm going to help you do this. And he said, Judy, and they would tell me this all the time, you're going to die in prison. You might as well accept it. So let's just go ahead and get this honor dorm created. I said, okay, but I am going home. I just want you to know that. I never gave up. I never said I was going to be there ever,
Yeah.
ever. I told him the only way I would do it is if I could have a dog as my cellmate and not an offender. And he said, you want a dog as your cellmate? I said, yes, because I helped start the Puppies for Parole program, where we would take shelter animals, shelter dogs. They would bring them to us and we would train them and then they would be adopted. So, so I got a black lab in my cell instead of a person. So that was fun to have on the honor dorm. No other offender ever had a dog as a roommate, unless you were in the program.
All of the other, inmates over there must have been like really happy to have a little dog around in the
Yeah,
prison.
they did. And that dog was trained so well. I could take him out on the yard and without a leash, and he would just stay right by my side. I don't care if balls were flying from playing softball or tennis balls, he would not leave my side.
Right.
And he'd play hide and go seek with the offenders on the unit, and he was fun to have. Well, we would make facials out of egg beaters, the egg beaters that are in a carton.
Yeah.
They would sell those as a fundraiser because we had organizations that I helped create, restorative justice organization, and we would have these fundraisers so we could give back to the community. Send them money or buy them things that different shelters would need. So we would use that as our facial. Use sugar as our scrub, sugar and honey. Honey was another thing we would put on our face.
What about like your role? How did you make friends when you first entered?
It was very hard. When I first went to prison, there was 100 women, and we were in a co-ed prison with men and women. The only one I know, the only one in the United States. Yeah, that was a little cray-cray.
How would that even work? Like, I'm just trying to picture, like, how would that even like look or work? Like,
Right. So the women were considered max inmates. The men, they were minimum custody. So they would go out on work release. Well, they would bring hooch out. They would bring liquor back. They would bring different items that we wanted back. And it's the only prison I've ever been in where there were so many pregnancies.
no,
Yes.
surprise.
And it was, yeah, in the story about our prison was in one of it was a motorcycle magazine back then in the 80s about the women's prison and how there was so many pregnancies because we would go to church together. We would have recreation together. We could go to classes together. But you didn't live in the same units together, of course, and you would not have meals together because the dining room was too small. But we'd play racquetball, handball, do all these other activities at the gym together. But there were also, I realized, a lot of abortions because administration would suggest that very strongly.
And
To
what are the
have
laws on
abortions.
abortion in Missouri?
You could have abortions back then. Mhm.
I would imagine there would be a lot of fights and violence over this stuff as well, over love, over.
Yes, there was. What would happen is there would be a lot of jealousies. Believe this or not, and this is really crazy now that I look back, is they would have dances once a month and in the gym, and they would listen to records back then. And if anybody put on a fast dance, that was a no-no. No fast dances, all slow dances. So you can only imagine. That was just like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And so the commonality we had is these women wanted to look good. They wanted to look nice for these guys. So I'd put on their makeup to them and I would do their hair. And my mother always sent my really nice clothes in. She sent ultra suede suits. She sent my fur coat into a prison. And I said, Mom, we cannot have these things. I mean, they let me have them, but I said, this is not what you wear in prison. She would send me, back then it was called Fredericks of Hollywood, kind of like Victoria's Secret clothes.
Oh.
I said, no, Mom, not here. This is not what we wear here. Now they have uniforms, but back then you had your own clothes.
Well, what about things like gender-based violence? You know, like people that were in prison for abusing female partners, or like women that had been abused and they were being put in the same prison, and now there's that mix happening. Yeah.
Because we also had two while I was there that were in transition of becoming the opposite sex. So they were housed there also. So it could get pretty crazy with that combination. But a lot of the women and men formed relationships and ended up getting married after they left. There was a fight one time. I was in the visiting room talking to one of the guys that I played racquetball in because I was pretty active in sports and stuff in prison. He said, hey, Judy, let's play racquetball tonight. I said, sure, we'll play. So he went to dinner with his buddy in the dining room. Pretty soon, I heard the goon squad running, and I had officers come to me and say, we just want you to know you caused a fight. They said, well, so was having dinner and telling his buddy he was going to play racquetball with you tonight, and they got into it because you were supposed to play racquetball with somebody else, and he took a fork, and we had metal forks then, stabbed him in the hand. And I said, oh my God. So stupid things like that would happen. And sometimes the guys would get really jealous of women that was going to be with other women. And it was not a well-received gesture.
So what were the kind of arguments, fights, violence that was happening in the all-females prison usually centered around?
Women are pretty passive-aggressive usually, so they will wait and prey on you. And sometimes it would be one woman liking another woman's woman, a lot of love, hate. Maybe one wouldn't have a lot of money, the other one would have money, so they were hooked up like that. But a fight could generate over, it was my turn in the microwave. What are you jumping line for? Now, what was taken very seriously is if there was fights in the dining room, because that was an area that would be considered a riot area. And so if you got into a fight there, you would do a lot more time in the hole. You would have a different kind of violation than just a fighting violation. We did have a food strike one time because we had so many women attempting suicide, because we had a warden that felt punishment was the way to deal with offenders. We had washers and dryers on each unit. He took those and everybody had to wash out of buckets, 5-gallon buckets. And it was so depressing. We had to hang clothes everywhere. He took away so many different things, and the girls just couldn't take the pressure of everything that was going on under his watch. And so they started hanging themselves in the prison. And so we thought, administration has to pay attention. Central office, which was in another city, had to pay attention to what was going on in this prison. So, not myself, but I do know others that did come up with a plan to have a food strike, which you always have to send numbers to central office about how many was eating in the dining room, how many did you have for breakfast, how many did you have for lunch, how many did you have for dinner, because they could kind of see if there was something brewing. When people didn't go to the dining room, what's happening? Is there a food strike going on? What's going on? And so we made sure that those that didn't have money had food to eat. So we all went on a food strike for lunch, and because we knew that would get attention from central office. I ended up going to the hole because I wouldn't tell him who started the food strike. The warden, he called me over to his office and he said, Henderson, I want to know who started this. And I have no idea. I don't know what to say, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, I'm going to give you one more chance.
I was curious about how many times you found yourself in the hole in your time there.
Well, I went to the hole for that because I wouldn't reveal who started the food strike. I was in the hole for having too many clothes. I had 96 tops and 35 pair of shoes.
Wow, that's more than me now.
You know what? Female staff said that they didn't have that many. I said, okay, I want you to count your tops. Summer, winter, spring, fall tops.
Okay.
And I was so good at hiding things. You learn so many different things in prison, how to compact things in a small space. They sold laundry baskets. So I had 6 laundry baskets lined up under my bed, and I would put clothes underneath my mattress because it was only an inch on a metal bed.
Right.
And and then I made shoe racks out of sheets to hang at each end of we had a closet at this prison. And so it took 4 officers 6 hours to go through my property, and I got a violation. So I went to the hole for that immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, but the first year of the first 2 years, I got 23 violations. After that, they really were very few and far between. I think for a total of 36 years, I ended up with maybe 28 violations. But you do have staff that will try to write you up for nothing just because they don't like you. But by that time, I had learned the policies enough and the rules enough that I would quote them back to them and challenge them. If you do write me up, I'm going to grieve you because you have no right to do this. And they would tell me I couldn't do this, and I would say, well, then you can't do that, because if you do that, you're violating a rule. And they'd say, okay, Judy, go ahead and do it. So it was like, don't play these games with me because I'm going to play them back with you. Yeah. We had one officer when I first came to prison that was there he was a property room officer, so he had a lot of pull with the offenders to get their property if they wanted it. But you had to do sexual favors for him. And I absolutely refused. And by that time, I was already so angry, that don't mess with me because I will get you back. I had to figure out a way to get him out of there because so many of the women that were being abused were just constantly crying and it was affecting them in such horrible ways. So I ended up setting him up, and where he had to call me down for my contact solution because they didn't have it in the canteen. He wouldn't call me down for my property. He would make my sister take those home, take any property that was sent out home with him. or with them. When he called me down, I saw an officer that wasn't one of the good old boys that would brush it under the rug. He was a very strict caseworker that would report anything he saw. So I thought, here's how we're going to play this. And I was thinking in my head real fast. He's coming down the hall. If I time it just right, he's going to look in here because I'm going to leave the door open and he's going to see what's going on. And so I went in. The property officer gave me my contact solution. He said, now what do I get, Judy? I said, anything you want. And so he grabbed me and started kissing me, and I was facing the door. So I saw the caseworker look in. He saw it. And I went up to my cell, and I knew it was just a matter of minutes before I'd be called to the warden's office. I went down there. There was the investigator, there was the warden, the assistant warden, and of course the caseworker and him. And I walked in. They said, Judy, we understand you were just kissing the property room officer. I said, no, he was kissing me. And he jumped up and he threw a fit. I didn't do that. She's a manipulator. I didn't do anything like that. I said, okay, I request a PSE, which is a voice test, voice lie detector test. He refused to take one. I passed it. They gave him early retirement. So he went to...
That's too lenient, though.
Oh, yeah. That's what they did back then. They did not. And still, even in our New Chillicothe prison where I was at, we had cases where I testified, well, I did in deposition for several girls that were being sexually molested by officers. And this was after I came home. It is a commonplace for that to occur in women's prisons. And so I will fight for that till the day I die to get those officers out of there.
It seems like, yeah, it is kind of like one of those situations where very easy for these officers to get away with this because one, whoever's in prison is already seen as guilty, you know, as manipulative and whatever. So they're by default already at a disadvantage. And then they're women and they're easy to prey on.
Correct.
And they're already vulnerable. Many of them have been victim of these things. They've been silenced for so long. So yeah, it's an easy target.
It is easy, and there's very few that will actually stand up and fight against that. But I had established myself well enough in the prison where I won several violations that I received. They were thrown out completely. One officer, she ended up having a stroke because it stressed her out so bad because she couldn't get me. She ended up coming back to work after she recovered somewhat. She couldn't work in general population. She had to work in an office. But she came to my cell door and she said, Judy, I want to apologize. I said, okay, for what? And she said, for always being so mean to you and trying to write you up. I said, thank you. Because I told her when this happened to her, I saw her and I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I've kept you in my prayers. I wasn't a mean-spirited person. I didn't want to see things like that to happen. But if you're going to come at me and try to always get me in the hole, tear up my property, plant things that shouldn't have been there, and write me up for bribing an officer when I didn't even have a conversation with you about bribery. That officer ended up becoming a white shirt, which is a captain or a lieutenant or a sergeant. And she came back years later and said she wanted to apologize for giving me that violation, but she was told to do it that morning at roll call just so they could have something to put me in the hole for. So there's a lot that goes on in the prisons that people don't have a clue about.
What was the hole like?
Sometimes I would be put in solitary confinement where there was two big doors, no windows, and a concrete slab you slept on. But you did have, it was called a wet cell, so you had a stool and a sink. And they would give you your food through what they call a chuck hole, which they slide your tray in. And you have no contact with anybody, nobody. The other hole, which is segregated, they call it. There are cells next to each other, so you can talk to people, you can communicate, you can have conversations all day and not be alone. They give you books to read. I did a lot of exercising whenever they would put me in the hole. But they did end up sending me to Arizona for 4 years over that property officer that got fired. Yeah. They wanted to put me in a prison that housed a lot of incorrigibles from all around the United States. And they wanted me away from my family. So they sent me to Arizona for 4 years. I thrived there. That's where it's a wealthy state. So they had all kinds of college classes, all kinds of activities. And that's where I started Women Against Violence. Did a lot of good things there and got a lot of good, serious therapy.
Right. So
And
you
then
feel
God
like,
was always a part of my journey too. I want to give him the glory for giving me the resilience, giving me the courage. I always had Jeremiah 29:11 above my cell mirror. I know the plans I have for you, a future and prosperity and good health. And prison was not a future. So I knew, what he does for one, he's going to do for another, and he shows no favoritism. And I got a lot of women out of prison. So I knew I was coming. And I got double the blessing because my sentence was commuted to life served, time served. The governor came to the prison that day to give me my paperwork, which I didn't know he was coming. And 6 months later gave me a full pardon. So I was totally exonerated with the help of my prosecutor that put me in prison and a lot of supporters.
wow.
So that's why I'm
Yeah,
sitting here with you today.
congratulations. Yeah. What was that moment like, that day that you were told that?
Oh, I don't even know if there's words. I fell to my knees crying because I was teaching a fitness class. And so I didn't have my makeup on. I wasn't ready. I had makeup on, but I was sweaty. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And they kept telling me, Judy, you have to go to the visiting room. You have to go to the visiting room. I said, I'm not going. That's not me. That's another Henderson. And they said, no, it's you. And if you don't go, you're just going to the hole. I said, okay, I'm going. I'm going to the visiting room. And so I got up there and I had to wait like an hour and a half because they said it was an attorney visit. But I knew my attorney wouldn't come without letting me know. Because everybody knew, do not go visit Judy unless she knows you're coming because she will not be ready and you will wait and till she gets her makeup on, till she gets her hair done. And so they knew not to come unexpectedly. So I just thought, oh my gosh, because I had filed clemency since 1983. With 6 governors, and I was on my 7th governor. But unbeknownst to me, he came, my 7th governor, God's number of completion. And when I saw him, I just fell to my knees bawling because I knew it had to be good. And so he had me sit down in a chair. And he said, on behalf of the state of Missouri, I want to commute your sentence to life served. And he said, you're going to go home today. And I said, what did you just say? He said, you're going to go home today. I said, today, right now. And he said, right now. And the warden came in and he let me know that I would be taken down to my cell to pack my property and that I could see whoever I wanted to see and tell them bye. And the governor said, I want to get out of the way because people are here that hadn't given up hope on you and had fought for you all this time. And I'm going to get out of the way so they can come in and see you. And in walked my daughter and my son and my grandchildren and my attorneys. And we just sat there and held each other and cried. And it was happy tears, of course.
Can you talk to me a little bit about adjusting to life outside? What were the new things that you'd seen and discovered?
Well, by the time I got to my daughter's house, I didn't know there was going to be tons of people there. And so that was crazy seeing everybody, and it was joyful, of course, but I spotted strawberries.
Okay.
And I thought, I can have strawberries. So that was like really cool to have a strawberry. And I still wasn't used to eating with metal forks, spoons and stuff. I would look for plasticware in my daughter's kitchen. I'd say, Angel, where's the plasticware? I can't find anything to eat with. She said, Mom, you can have a fork, a metal fork. So sometimes she'd have to remind me. And the seatbelt, she would always have to tell me, Mom, put on your seatbelt. And then getting used to sleeping in a bed that without a mattress, it's just an inch thick. I thought I was going to have to sleep on the floor the first night because it was too soft. I couldn't do it. Then I had my own bathroom with my bedroom, and it was like I walked in there and I thought, where am I going to put my toothbrush? There's too much room in here. I'll never find it. Because we're used to just a little metal locker to put our toothbrush in. Left side, top shelf. It just felt weird to have so much space. And then whenever I went to your bathrooms out here, it was like, okay, I stood up. How do you flush this stool? What do you do? Because I hear nothing and there's no handle. I don't know how to flush it. And so I'd have to have Angel go to the bathroom with me several times before I could learn all the different ways of how to flush a stool or how to turn on the sink and how to get soap. We had a bar of soap. Good grief,
Yeah.
And no, you have it in these containers. You have water. You just put your hand under the faucet and it
Yeah, and it
comes
just
on.
comes
And
out.
it was like, this is too much. And the population, the roads, just so much traffic. And the total environment had changed. The landmarks had changed. I didn't even recognize anything anymore. Where to eat? Where do you go eat? You have so many places. And everybody asked me, Judy, where do you like to eat? What's your favorite place? I said, I don't know. That's a big decision to make because I like it all.
Right. So in a way, you're kind of probably feeling really lonely in this really crowded space and just like so like I'm kind of lost. Like, what do I do with this?
Yeah, it was. And I know it was December 20th whenever I was released. My daughter hadn't shopped yet. She said, come on, Mom, we have to speed shop. I said, what are you talking about, speed shop? I haven't even been in a store. And so we went shopping and it was like, oh my God, I'm in this store. What do I do? All these,
Yeah.
all these people that's just going here and going there, not paying any attention to me. And then you have these machines where you put cards. Nobody pays with money. And it's like, what are these machines and what are these cards everybody's using? They're using different kinds of cards. And I thought, I will never understand what all this means. It's too much. So it was really challenging. Then the inside of a car looked like a cockpit, all these gadgets and all these buttons. I thought, I will never be able to learn how to drive because I'm afraid I'll eject myself out of the car or something, And then my son-in-law got me an iPhone and I'd never seen an iPhone before. And I asked him, what do you do with this? And now I can just maneuver it like it was nothing. Whenever I went in, phones were on the wall. And during my incarceration, phones were still on the wall. We didn't have, tablets. We didn't have computers. So, technology was, oh my gosh, I will never understand these computers. Then I went to give a talk at Catholic Charities of Kansas City, St. Joseph, an agency that, helps the poor, helps the homeless and babies. They wanted me to come to work for them. I said, work? I said, I think I'm retired from prison. I don't know how I can work at your agency. I don't know anything about computers or anything like that. And they said, we're going to teach you. And so I've been there for 6 years. I just can't imagine not doing that because it's so rewarding helping so many different areas of their lives and still being able to help offenders when they come home and get them housing and get them food and get them a job. That's all so important to me.
Yeah.
And
in a way, you're really helping with that recidivism stuff, right? Like, because we know that
yes.
there's people that end up reoffending because they're not being given the support that they need.
Yes, and I still work on different laws getting passed here in the state of Missouri and for those that are still incarcerated that do need to come home. I still meet with politicians in their behalf and work with their families. So the work is never done. And then when people started hearing my story, they said, Judy, you have to write a book.
Yeah.
You have to let people know and give them hope, let them know that it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, it took us 6 years to do When the Light Finds Us. And I hope everybody grabs the book, enjoys the book, and try to put yourself, whatever your situation is in your life,
Yeah, I love that.
see how something in that book can help with that.
Did you, by the way, at any point, did you write in that book about what happened with your co-defendant after you got out of prison? Is he out? Is he free, roaming about, or is like whatever happened there?
He passed away 2 years ago of COVID.
So you were out before he'd passed?
Yes, I was out, and I knew what he looked like because of a caseworker in prison that always kept me updated. She said, here's a picture of him, and I want you to pay attention whenever you get out to make sure he's not in a crowd where you're at or something. So of course, I don't acknowledge him by his name. I don't want to honor him in any way. I forgave him. I forgave the system that did this to me, because there's two things, like I said earlier, you can either get bitter or get better. But I want it to be positive. I did a vision board. Everything on my vision board has come true except for a couple of sports cars and a jet. But everything else has come true. We're hoping to do a movie, from this story. Life is good. I can't be angry about anything out here. My life is great.
That you've turned something so difficult into such a joyful little journey for yourself. And I think that's exactly what this podcast is about as well. We want to bring and feature individuals who've probably had a bit of a hard hit from life, some adversity, and who's sort of been able to turn it around and say, hey, look, when life gives you lemons, I'm going to make lemonade. I'm going to sweeten it right there.
Make your life better. Make it what you want it to be. Create a vision board. I made one out of 2 backs of legal pad cardboard. Yeah. It was very generic, but I'll tell you, that vision board keeps you focused on your goals. Yeah. You keep saying it, you keep believing it, and it will happen. Trust me. Yes, it does happen.
I love that. Judy, thank you so much for being on Multispective with us today. And
you're welcome.
I really, really appreciate you sharing this.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you letting me share my story.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas Thierry, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.